Good afternoon, everyone. We've all been there. You send a message, a proposal, an email, and you wait, and then silence. You refresh your inbox, you recheck the chat, hoping for a response. And when it doesn't come, something inside you shifts. You feel small. You start wondering if you said the wrong thing, if they're upset, or if you're just not important enough to be replied to. When we think about communication, we often focus on the content of what we say, the words, the message, the ideas. But how often do we consider the energy with which we communicate? How often do we stop to reflect on the way we show up in the conversation, the interactions, and the moments of connection? And who knows how many other people lobby way too late for us to move on, especially when the guaranteed return is sacrificed for moving on. The truth is, the way we communicate is just as much about who we are being in the moment as it is about the words we speak. Communication is not just about transmitting information. It is a reflection of our self-worth, confidence, and belief in our own value. How we express ourselves, how we reach out, follow up, and engage with others shows us whether we honor ourselves in the process. Alignment to me is about confidence of when we send a message, be it an email, text, or conversation, there's an underlying energy in how we do it. If we are sending it from a place of self-doubt, looking for validation or approval, we are subconsciously transmitting that energy. The way we word our messages or frame our requests might unintentionally show vulnerability, but not the kind of vulnerability that invites connection. It can be the kind that inadvertently diminishes us. Further, this kind of communication is rooted in a belief that our value is tied to the response we receive from others. About self-worth doesn't come from the approval of others. It comes from within. It's an internal knowing that no matter how someone else responds, we are enough. We are worthy of respect and consideration, regardless of whether someone replies to our message or not. So how does this apply to communication? First, the way we communicate reflects the respect we have for ourselves. When we communicate from a place of self-worth, we are confident in what we're saying and we're not dependent on the outcome. When we send a message, we know that the value of our words isn't determined by how quickly someone responds, or even if they respond at all. The value of our communication is intrinsic to who we are and what we stand for. This doesn't mean we don't care about the response. We absolutely do. But it means we are not at the mercy of the reply. We don't base our worth on their answer. Let's consider a few key ways our self-worth influences communication. Confidence in our messages. When we communicate with self-worth, our messages are clear, more direct, and rooted in confidence. We are not second-guessing our words, and we don't apologize for taking up space. In contrast, when we doubt our value, we might downplay our message, apologize unnecessarily, or over-explain to seek approval. Confidence comes from knowing that what we say matters, that we are worthy of being heard, and our ideas deserve to be acknowledged. Our words are no longer tentative or apologetic. They become an expression of our belief in our own worth. Setting boundaries and expectations. Another powerful element of self-worth in communication is the ability to set clear boundaries. When we value ourselves, we understand the importance of respecting our time, energy, and emotional well-being. This means not allowing ourselves to be ignored or dismissed without acknowledging it. When we follow up on a message or request, it's not out of desperation, but from a place of assertion and clarity. We know what we need and we are comfortable asking for it. Our boundaries are a reflection of our belief that our needs are important and worth expressing. We communicate with respect ourselves and for others. No need for validation. Perhaps one of the most powerful ways self-worth impacts communication is in the need for external validation. So often we communicate hoping to receive a certain response that will validate our choices, our feelings, or our work. But when we communicate from a place of self-worth, we no longer rely on others for that validation. We don't need someone to reply to feel seen or valued. We are already enough, and we communicate because we have something meaningful to share, not because we are hoping for a specific outcome. We trust that our voice has value regardless of how others react. Authenticity and connection. Communication rooted in self-worth invites authenticity. We are not trying to be something we're not. We express ourselves honestly and openly because we know that who we are is worthy of acceptance. This authenticity builds trust and connection with others because they can feel that we are speaking from a genuine place. When we speak with clarity and vulnerability without the fear of judgment, we allow others to feel comfortable doing the same. We create a space for honest, meaningful conversations that foster real connection. Why this matters. And we approach communication from a place of self-worth, we are essentially claiming our right to exist and be heard. It means we recognize that we are deserving of attention, respect, and kindness, no matter what the outcome of any given conversation might be. In the world of business, leadership, or even personal relationships, this kind of communication has profound power. It allows us to express our ideas freely, negotiate respectfully, and ask for what we need without fear or hesitation. When we're not reliant on others to validate our worth, we free ourselves to be more authentic, more courageous, and ultimately more effective in our communication. And so when I think about relationships, communicating are truthfully and creatively more effective in our communication. It's not about being perfect in every interaction. It's about the consistent practice of showing up as our true selves. And with every message we send, from casual text to important business emails, we can remind ourselves, I am worthy of being heard. I am worthy of respect. So the next time you find yourself hesitating before sending a message, wondering if it's too much, too soon, or too bold, ask yourself, what if I believed I was worthy of being heard? What would my message look like if I communicated from that place of certainty and confidence? When we communicate with self-worth, we are not just sending words, we are sending a powerful message to the world about who we are and what we stand for. And that, in turn, invites the world to respond to us in kind. Desperation is a powerful emotion. It arises when we feel that we need something, whether it's approval, acknowledgement, or a response from others, in order to validate our existence, ideas, or value. In communication, this manifests in the form of urgency or pleading. We send a message and then sit and wait, checking constantly for a reply. The longer the silence, the more desperate we feel. We might find ourselves sending follow-up messages with increasingly anxious or apologetic tones, hoping to provoke a response. But here's the reality. Desperation is not the energy that inspires meaningful connections or positive outcomes. It might get attention in the short term, but it often leaves us feeling diminished, powerless, or overlooked in the long run. Confidence, on the other hand, is a completely different energy. Confidence is not about arrogance or dominance. It's about self-assurance, trust in our own worth, and the ability to navigate uncertainty with calm and composure. When we move from desperation to confidence, we stop chasing after validation and start standing firmly in our own value. We recognize that we don't need to beg for attention or approval because we already have the internal assurance that our voice matters and our actions are aligned with our beliefs. So, how can we shift from desperation to confidence in communication? One, recognizing the roots of desperation. Before we can shift from desperation to confidence, we need to understand where this desperation comes from. It often arises from fear, fear of rejection, fear of being overlooked, fear of not being good enough. When we tie our worth to someone else's response, our emotions and behaviors are governed by that fear. We might find ourselves checking our inbox obsessively, rethinking every message, or apologizing unnecessarily. The key to overcoming desperation is to first acknowledge that fear. Fear thrives in the absence of self-trust. And when we don't trust ourselves, our value, our decisions, or our contributions, we become reliant on external sources for reassurance. This creates a cycle of anxiety and neediness. Once we recognize that our desperation stems from fear, we can choose to acknowledge it without letting it dictate our actions. Fear doesn't have to control us. Instead of allowing it to define our communication, we can shift our mindset to one of trust and self-assurance. 2, embrace the power of boundaries. Desperation often leads us to neglect our boundaries. When we feel like we need something from someone, we may give up our own needs in exchange for theirs. We might ignore the fact that our time and energy are valuable, and instead we find ourselves overextending or chasing after responses. Confidence, however, is built upon healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, but guidelines that help us preserve our sense of self and protect our emotional energy. When we respect our own boundaries, we stop overexerting ourselves in an attempt to gain someone's approval. We communicate with clarity, knowing what we want and being confident enough to ask for it without forcing it. For example, instead of constantly checking your messages and feeling the need to follow up multiple times, a confident communicator understands that their time is valuable and that a single polite follow-up is enough. They trust that their message has been received and that they will be responded to in due time without chasing after it. 3, focus on the value you bring. When we're desperate, we often forget why we're communicating in the first place. We get lost in the desire for a response and lose sight of the reason we reached out: to share something valuable, to solve a problem, or to build a connection. Confidence stems from an understanding that what you have to say is important, regardless of whether or not someone responds immediately. When we shift our focus from seeking validation to recognizing the value we bring to the table, we can move from desperation to confidence. Our messages become less about us and more about the purpose we are serving. We trust that the right people will respond when they're ready, and we don't need to chase them or convince them of our value. Instead of worrying about being ignored, we lean into our ability to contribute and make a difference. Whether it's a business proposal, a personal message, or a professional inquiry, we remember that we are offering something that matters. 4, master the art of the follow-up. One of the most powerful ways to transition from desperation to confidence is through mastering the follow-up. Too often, when we don't hear back from someone, we assume that we're being ignored or dismissed. In desperation, we might send multiple follow-ups or apologize excessively. But in doing so, we communicate that we don't believe in our own worth. A confident follow-up is a reminder of your value, but it is also respectful of the other person's time and space. It acknowledges that they may have been busy or that things got lost in the shuffle, but it doesn't beg for a response. Instead, it sets the tone for a productive, collaborative exchange. A simple professional follow-up might look like, Subject: following up on. I wanted to check in to see if you had a chance to review my previous message regarding. I understand that things can get busy and I appreciate your time. Please let me know if you need any additional information or if it would be helpful to set up a quick chat. Looking forward to hearing from you. The best. 5. Trust the process and let go of the outcome. Ultimately, confidence is about trusting the process. When we move from desperation to confidence, we stop fixating on the outcome. We understand that we can't control how others respond to us, but we can control how we show up. We stop waiting for others to validate us or our efforts because our worth is not contingent on their approval. We trust that if we are doing the right thing, the right people will respond at the right time. We have the courage to let go of the need for immediate results and give space for things to unfold naturally. By focusing on the action, setting the message with clarity, following up with confidence, and maintaining our self-worth, we are no longer dependent on external validation. The process becomes less about a desperate plea for attention and more about authentic engagement. The first step in finding the courage to communicate with integrity is recognizing the fear we often carry. The fear of rejection or disagreement. Many of us have been conditioned to avoid conflict or tension in communication. We've been taught that harmony is the goal and that speaking our truth might jeopardize relationships or opportunities. This fear can lead to compromises in what we say or withhold, often to keep the peace or protect ourselves from uncomfortable outcomes. But here's the truth. Integrity is not about avoiding conflict. It's about handling it with respect and honesty. Communicating with integrity means that you're willing to face the discomfort of potential disagreement or misunderstanding, because staying true to yourself is more important than avoiding conflict. By acknowledging this fear and accepting it, we realize that it's not the disagreement we should fear, but the cost of not being authentic. When we compromise our truth, we undermine our own integrity and ultimately diminish our ability to connect authentically with others. The courage to communicate with integrity is about prioritizing authenticity over convenience. 2, staying grounded in your values. The next step in communicating with integrity is staying grounded in your values. Your values are the compass that guides every decision you make, including how you communicate. When we are clear about what we believe in, what we stand for, and what matters most to us, it becomes easier to express ourselves authentically, even when faced with resistance or pressure. For example, if honesty is one of your core values, then you have to communicate in ways that reflect that honesty, regardless of how uncomfortable it may be for others to hear. If respect is one of your values, then you must speak and listen in ways that honor both your voice and the voices of others. When your values are the foundation of your communication, you are aligned and grounded in your interactions. You don't have to guess what the right thing to say is, because your values will always point you in the right direction. Staying grounded in your values also means knowing when to speak up and when to stay silent. Integrity isn't just about being vocal. It's about understanding that sometimes silence can be more powerful than words. The courage to speak when necessary and to remain quiet when needed requires deep self-awareness and respect for your own boundaries. 3, overcoming the urge to please. One of the greatest obstacles to communicating with integrity is the urge to please. So often we soften our words, filter our thoughts, or avoid saying what's truly on our minds because we want to be liked or accepted. We fear that speaking our truth will upset someone or make them uncomfortable, and so we suppress our honest feelings to maintain the peace. But when we prioritize pleasing others over our own integrity, we not only betray ourselves, but we also dilute the quality of the relationship. Authentic relationships, whether personal or professional, are built on mutual respect and honesty. If we are constantly molding our communication to meet the expectations of others, we're not fostering genuine connection. Instead, we're constructing a false version of who we are, which ultimately leaves both parties feeling disconnected and unfulfilled. Communicating with integrity means resisting the urge to people please. It's about speaking your truth with respect, even if it's uncomfortable, and accepting that your truth may not always be what others want to hear, and that's okay. The courage to communicate with integrity requires us to release the need for external validation and to focus on maintaining alignment with our own beliefs. 4, being transparent and open, even in difficult conversations. There are times in life when conversations are difficult, whether they involve giving constructive feedback, addressing a conflict, or discussing a sensitive topic. These moments require a unique kind of courage because speaking honestly in tough situations often feels risky. We fear that we might hurt someone's feelings, cause damage to a relationship, or even lose an opportunity. But integrity requires us to be transparent and open, even when it's uncomfortable. It's in these challenging moments that true integrity shines. Honest communication can transform conflict into connection. It can turn misunderstandings into learning opportunities. And it can clear the air, allowing both parties to understand each other more deeply and rebuild trust. To communicate with integrity in difficult conversations, you must first acknowledge the discomfort you feel and proceed anyway. The key is compassion for both yourself and the other person. The courage to speak your truth, even in difficult situations, is about approaching the conversation with empathy and respect while still remaining true to your beliefs and values. You're not speaking out of anger or frustration. You're speaking out of a desire to be honest and to foster understanding. 5, accepting the uncertainty of outcomes. One of the most challenging aspects of communicating with integrity is accepting the uncertainty of the outcomes. When we speak with honesty, there's always the possibility that we won't get the response we expect, or that we might even be rejected, misunderstood, or criticized. The courage to communicate with integrity means being willing to face these uncertain outcomes and trusting that your message will reach the people who matter most in the way it's meant to. The truth is, we can't control how others will respond, but we can control how we show up. Integrity means knowing that even if the outcome isn't what we hoped for, we stayed true to ourselves. And that in itself is a success. We communicate with integrity not to get something from others, but to honor who we are and what we believe. Conclusion. The courage to communicate with integrity is about more than just telling the truth. It's about aligning our words with our values, being honest with others and ourselves, and trusting that authenticity will always lead us to the right place. It requires bravery in the face of uncertainty, a willingness to speak up when it's hard, and the strength to stay grounded in our beliefs. When we communicate with integrity, we inspire trust, create deeper connections, and lead with respect, both for ourselves and others. Integrity is the cornerstone of authentic communication, and it's the courageous choice that builds the foundation for every meaningful relationship. The courage to communicate with integrity isn't about being perfect. It's about being real and choosing honesty even when it's uncomfortable. And that ultimately is what allows us to connect with others in the deepest, most authentic ways. In the end, the courage to communicate with integrity is not just about how we interact with others. It's about how we show up for ourselves. It's about trusting that our truth is valuable, even when it's not easy to express, and knowing that when we speak with authenticity, we are creating the foundation for real, meaningful connections. Every time we choose integrity over convenience, we honor not only our values, but also the trust others place in us. We build relationships based on mutual respect and understanding, knowing that authenticity is the gateway to lasting bonds. So let us remember, true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in alignment with our deepest values, even in the face of discomfort. Let us communicate not for validation, but from a place of self-respect. Let us speak with clarity, compassion, and honesty, knowing that when we communicate with integrity, we are not just sharing our thoughts, but showing up as our most authentic selves. As we move forward, let us commit to the courage to communicate with integrity, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the most powerful way to connect with the world and with those who truly matter. Thank you.